And they were confused. They were like, no, Greg, the drum and bass stuff's over here. And I'm like, I'm not interested in that. I've got enough drum and bass. I said, I'm interested in the soul, funk and disco. And I'd walk out, with bags and bags of like 12 inches, of soul, West End, Sam Records, all the classic kind of soul, funk, disco, boogie kind of record labels. And I was obsessed with collecting it. But even then, even in those days, I never thought I would take it further. It was just a hobby. And what sort of the actual transition from drum and bass to Dr. Packer happened when a friend of mine, he was working in a little beach bar, and he lived in Sydney, but he was working in Perth, and he had to go back urgently. It was an emergency, and he rang me up. He said, Greg, I'm in trouble. I've got to leave. I'm literally next weekend. I've got to be gone. I'm leaving the club, in the shit. There's no DJ. Can you help me out? Do you know anyone? I said, well, what music are you playing down there? He said, well, I'm playing like soul, funk, hip hop, disco, and I finished with a bit of house. And I went, you're going to laugh at this, but I'm your man. He went, you? He goes, you're drum and bass. And I went, yeah, no. I said, but I've got the records. And he goes, really? I said, yeah, I've got thousands of that stuff, loads of it. And I said, I'd love to do it. And he goes, well, if you want to, the job's yours. So this was probably 2012. So let's say 10 years ago now. So I'll drag my records down there, like 2 or 3 crates of records, and I'd play for 5 hours every Saturday night. And I had one guy come up to me once and said to me, oh, it's interesting that you're playing on vinyl and you're playing the originals. And I thought, well, what's interesting about that? He said, I'm surprised you're not into the re-edits, And I was like, didn't really know what he was talking about. And he said, he goes, you should go on this website called Juno Download. And there's a dedicated section called disco or new disco re-edits. And he said, and basically people are remixing disco. They're layering kick drums on them. They're quantizing them so it's mixable. You can basically build a set rather than just drop records, And I was like, okay, interesting. And then he wrote down one name on the back of a beer mat, and that name was Late Nite Tuff Guy. And I remember looking at it thinking, what a funny name that is. And he goes, seriously, he goes, Google this guy, you'll see what I mean. I went, okay. So never saw this guy again. And I owe everything to him, basically, because one day I'll meet him again and I'll buy him a beer and say thanks. But off he went. And then the next day, sure enough, I searched Late Nite Tuff Guy, got onto his SoundCloud, went through everything he was doing. And one particular track, which was one of my favorite tracks of all time, which is A Lover's Holiday by Change, he'd remixed it and he'd put this big kick drum behind it. He'd looped it, filtered it, and just almost made it his own track. But it was A Lover's Holiday by Change. And I was just fascinated by it. Honestly, I was like, what is going on here? And then as I looked further into it, I seen that he'd made a career out of it. He had agents in Europe, in the US, and he was touring the world basically out of doing these re-edits. And I thought, I've got to have a go at this. And then, I had sort of 20 years studio experience from making drum and bass, and I ran my own record label. So I was no...
Wait, but you never told anybody what your name was in the drum and bass scene.
Greg Packer. So which is my actual name. So that was the name I went under for, 25 years. So once I decided I'd made my first couple of re-edits, I played him to my friend who was, I mentioned before, Casual Connection. His name's Lucas. Hi. And he said, why don't you start a SoundCloud page and upload these few edits? You never know, someone might listen to them. So I said, okay, but I can't put them out as Greg Packer because I've built that name over all these years as a drum and bass producer. And people are going to listen to this, disco stuff, at 115 BPM disco stuff, and think, what's he doing? And he said, well, change your name. excuse me, he said, change your name. And
that's not something easy to do because you made your name as Greg Packer, your real name, right?
and I said, well, what I could do is keep Packer and don't use Greg, put something else in front of it. And I was thinking of all these different names. I was thinking DJ Packer, no, I didn't like it. Mr. Packer, no, I didn't like it. Everything I put in front of it, I didn't like. And then I remember I had a friend of mine in the old drum and bass days. He used to call me the Disco Doctor because of my obsession with collecting disco records, and because my initials were GP, which is General Practitioner, which means doctor, of course. And then I sort of like thought, well, what about Dr. Packer then? And that was the first thing that I thought had a ring to it. And I thought, that's not too bad, actually. I quite like that. And then I thought, I wasn't sort of serious about it to begin with. I thought, I'll put these tracks up. I'll create an artist account, Dr. Packer. I honestly didn't think anything would happen. And I got a message within 24 hours from a record label in Sweden called Disco Dat. And he said, I would release these 4 tracks, 4 edits that you've done. I said, really? I thought, I've got nothing to lose. So I said, all right, go for it. And that was that. So that's where it kind of really started. And it really just built from there.
So it's basically a wing and a prayer. Put up the SoundCloud. Let's see what happens. You don't happen. And then next thing you know, the first message comes in.
I think the turning point where I started to believe that something, I could take this further, something big could come out of this, was I had an inbox request from Dimitri from Paris asking for a copy of one of my earliest edits, which was I Can't Go For That by Hall & Oates. And he sent me a lovely message that said, I think you've done an amazing job. Could I please have a copy for my sets? And I'm like, come on, it's Dimitri from Paris. Of course you can. And and I remember he left a nice little comment under the track as well. And then I got another message said to me, Dave Lee, formerly known as Joey Negro, had charted one of your tracks, put in his top 10 on, and I went, you're kidding me, really? And he said, yeah. So he was playing one. And then the next thing I knew, I got an email from with a letterhead defected Simon Dunmore, saying, would you like to be a guest on our radio show, Defected in the House? Which I thought was weird, because I thought, well, isn't Defective like, house, like straight up house? I think, why would they be interested in me? And but I thought, well, I'm not going to say no, because I knew Defected was just such a big organization, so I went with it and did it. And as I sort of spoke to him further, he told me about the Glitterbox thing, that he'd started doing some parties in Ibiza, which was under the Glitterbox name, which was like a side project to Defected. And he said, look, we want to take it further. We want to start a record label. We want to start producing music and put out remixes and originals. And we want to take it to the next level. And we would like you to be our first release, but which I think was Sure Thing, Holding You Tight, which came out around about 2016. And that was my first release on Glitterbox, and that's kind of how that started. But I think once I'd got that email from Simon and the messages from Dimitri and Dave Lee, I was like, well, there's got to be something in this, because these guys are the cream of the crop. They're at the top, and they're showing interest in me. I've got to be on the right path here. So I spoke to my wife, and I said, because I had actually planned to retire when I hit 40, and I've just hit 50, by the way. But just after I'd hit 40, all this was happening. And I said to my wife, I can't stop now. I said, this is looking really promising,
After retirement, what was the plan? You're retiring to do what now?
Well, probably just try and do as much as I could in the studio, because I've done some mastering, and I still produce music. But I think what I meant was, with the drum and bass stuff, it wasn't great money. It wasn't like kind of money I would be on as Dr. Packer. So it was kind of like, I thought, do I want to be sort of scratching around in my 40s, staying out till 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, earning pretty, rubbish money? And I just thought, no, I'm just too old for it. I just thought, no. And then but I did say I would only stop, unless I was doing well, basically. If I could go full time with music and I was earning a good living out of it, then yes, I'd keep going. And that's exactly what was happening. It was basically turning around. My profile was building. Obviously, social media helped a lot, because the actual transition fooled a lot of people. A lot of people didn't know it was Greg Packer. When I did my first tour as Dr. Packer back in the UK, people were expecting a young man in his 20s with an Australian accent turn up, but there's me, in my mid 40s, and I was originally from the UK, and it surprised a lot of people. And I thought, oh, and then once I sort of said, look, I'm not new to the music industry. I've had 25 years in drum and bass. I've run record labels. I've been around the clock, and then, but even 2 or 3 years later, people would go, oh my God, I remember you as Greg Packer. I've just realized that you're actually, Dr. Packer. Oh, wow. And, but I think because the two types of music were so far apart from each other, I mean, I can honestly say I can't think of one other person or one other drum and bass artist or DJ that's gone to disco. I mean, I've seen some of them go to like dubstep. I've seen some of them go to like hip hop and sort of like EDM music. But to sort of to go from drum and bass to disco is all virtually unheard of. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that's ever done that.
I don't think there's anybody else. That's what makes your story that more important, because you had two different lives.
Well, you get, like, for example, you got Late Nite Tuff Guy, who's also from Australia, from Adelaide. He was also doing techno, so he'd kind of gone from techno to disco, which isn't that far apart. It's still a thumping kick drum. It is a little bit different, but from drum and bass, you're talking 175 BPM, like right down to like a 4/4 kind of house tempo sort of groove. It was it was quite a change.
And especially coming out of Australia.
Yeah, true. Yeah, exactly.
No one expect it from the UK or America. You don't expect from out of Australia this drum and bass DJ to all of a sudden turn and say, right, well, we're going to stop that, and now we're going to do this disco thing.
Yeah.
What? It's like, what? Wait, what? No, normally hip hop people make that transition. The hip hop guy may say, hey, I'll go that way because the funk and the soul, it lends itself. But this is such a drastic change, switching up.
Yeah, like when I went from hip hop to drum and bass, that wasn't so extreme, because it was like the break beats, and the samples were sort of, fairly similar. But yeah, it's but the thing is as well, like the disco scene was a lot bigger in Sydney and Melbourne as well. I mean, you've got Sydney's one of probably the second or third gay capital of the world, so disco's quite big over there, and same with Melbourne. But not only that, I'm transitioning to disco in Perth, where there was basically no scene. I remember the first couple of years I was doing Dr. Packer gigs in Perth. They were rubbish. Honestly, like, I was playing to a third of a nightclub, and they were standing around looking bored. No one was into it. But it changed. It changed, and I think with me being associated with such a big brand like Defected and Glitterbox, and releasing several albums, a lot of eyes went on me. And then all of a sudden, once I'd done that, I can remember being booked for a Dr. Packer gig in Perth and just shrugging my shoulders, thinking, well, this is just going to be rubbish like all the others. And I remember turning up, and it was chock-a-block, and like people were dancing and responding. And I thought, what's going on here? This is amazing. And people were holding their phones up to the DJ console, and they were requesting my own productions that were on Glitterbox and stuff. And it was as though I felt it for the first time. I've got fans here now. I've got people that are responding to what I'm doing as Dr. Packer in my hometown, and it's been great since then. I mean, the last few years, I get excited now. Like I've got bookings in Perth, you know, that lay ahead of me in October, and I'm really looking forward to doing them because I know they're going to be great. So it did pick up. It took a while, but it did pick up.
When you started to do the productions and the remixing, did you have anybody that was like you mused in a way that you were listening to their stuff, or you just went on your own whim and said, I'm going to do it this way?
I did exactly that. Yeah. What I would do was, I had a way that I produced drum and bass. So when I made drum and bass, it was generally original music. I'd have vocalists that would come in. I'd have rappers. I'd have female singers. And what I used to do, like, I'm not like a professionally trained keyboard player. I know basic chord sequences, but I'm no genius. So I used to sample like a groove from maybe like an old soul tune or something. I would cut it up and I would rebuild another groove around that. And that's how I used to work. And then I would match a bass line to that, and I would match other sounds. And when I started sort of doing the re-edits, it was once you had to quantize and warp everything. And once I had everything in time with my kick drum over the top, I was like, yeah, okay, this sounds good and it's probably passable. But I was never satisfied with saying that's it. It felt like cheating to me. It felt like all I'd done is whacked a kick drum over the top and that's it. And a lot of artists do that. And I think it sort of shows, like, it doesn't, you know, sound that great. And I always wanted more. So what I would do was I would work out the chord progression that they were using in the original song. I would start layering my own on top. I would recreate the bass line and layer that on the top. And then once I'd had all these extra elements, I was able to do like a proper mix down, you know, like in any track. And the production would just come alive. Like everything sounded nice and separated. It was sonically good. Everything had its own place. And I was like, and I'd pull all the low end out of the original song, you know, so it wasn't fighting with my bass line or anything like that. And once I started playing them out in the clubs, you know, I would instantly get people going, how do you get your edits to sound so fat and so big? And I'm like, well, because I'm putting in that extra work. So I would produce an edit or a rework in the same way as I would produce a drum and bass track, which I don't think many people will work in that way. You know, I used to have conversations with other producers and I say, do you replay your bass lines? And they go, no. And I say, well, you know, and then I just, and you notice it on the dance floor as well. Like, you know, there's other people that work with the same technique that I work as, such as a good example would be Michael Gray or Dave Lee, you know, and when those guys do their remixes and edits and whatnot, they do exactly the same thing. They put that extra time in. And of course, I mean, if you've got your stems or your multi-tracks, you know, you're able to do that anyway, but not everyone has got access to those. You know, you've got like someone like Dave Lee who's got, you know, stacks of multi-tracks, and so he's all right, but we're not all in that same boat. So, you know, if I hear something I haven't got the multi-track for, you know, I will use those other methods to try and get that same result. And I've often tricked people as well, like, you know, people like, I think the first time I re-edited Rapture by Blondie, I only had the a cappella. So but what I'd done is I'd recreated everything, recreated the chords, recreated the bass line. and I was able to just strip everything down and give it a breakdown where the vocal would be on its own with my music underneath. And then people would say, oh, where did you get the stems from Blondie? And I said, I haven't got the stems. And they went, well, how did you do a breakdown? And I said, because what's running in the breakdown is my recreated music over the a cappella. And I go, oh, okay. And so I've often tricked people, you know, by just working from the 12-inch single, and people actually thinking or assuming you've done it from the multi-tracks.
So are you actually listening to the parts and playing them on the keyboard, or you're doing something where we call, audio to MIDI?
Yes, yeah. I work in both audio and MIDI. Yeah, I mean, I use the quickest way for me to sort of figure out a chord progression is I'll use Melodyne, and if there's a section in the song that say would have the chords clean, without the drums, then I would just take that little section, put it into Melodyne, and that would often spit out the notes as MIDI. Then I would re-import them into my I use Pro Tools, so I import them back into Pro Tools, and then you'd have roughly the notes that you needed, and you might have to tweak it a bit, and but you'd sort of generally get that chord progression, and the same thing I apply with the bass line as well. I mean, it's not the kind of thing where you can just import it in and it's done and ready to go. You've still got to put in a lot of TLC. You might have to erase a few notes or something, because Melodyne's not always 100% accurate. There might be one bum note that's throwing everything off, and you've got to figure out what note that is and then pull it out. That. So there is a bit of, you can't really rush it. You just sort of basically just trust your ears. That's what I do.
So when you start a project from inception to the end delivery, how long does it take you about?
It depends on how much I get stuck into it. Like my average day in the studio in Australia, I like to try and do 8 hours. So I start around about 9 o'clock in the morning, get stuck in, have a break, and then finish the rest of the day. I've been known to do one in a day, but often like the next day I'll listen to it and things will stand out, and I'll pick things, and I'll have to remix it or master it or something the next day. So probably 48 hours. It just depends. Some are really tricky. Like if some have got a real complex bass line and you're trying to follow every note, that can take me like a whole week. But if I think it's sounding good enough to pursue it, and I think no, this is sounding really good, I need to finish this, and you think, well, it's a lot of work, but the end result is going to be amazing, especially if you can get it released. Then they'll put in those extra miles. But like some tunes are very basic, as you know, like so you could be working on a tune with a very simple bass line, and you might figure out that bass line in 5 minutes, and then it's done, and then you work on to the next element and stuff like that. So some of those you can finish it in one session or two at the most. So it just really depends on the track. I mean, I am a fast worker. I mean, I've done enough of it. I'm quite experienced now, so I can work pretty quickly. But multi-tracks, that's a different game. Like, so if I've got a multi-track of an old song that needs to be quantized, then you've got something like, I don't know, anywhere between say 16 or 20 channels that all need to be, snapped to the grid and quantized, and that can take a long time. But if you've got something special, like maybe you've got a multi-track that no one else has got, or it's really rare, and you think, well, it's worth doing it because it's going to be in the long run, it's going to be worth doing it. And they can take a long time. They can take weeks. And that's just to get it to the stage where you can work on it. Just getting it all in time.
So basically, time locking. So it's on the grid. On those 4 beats, 4/4 timing, so it makes it very easy for mixing.
Yeah, but like, say with your remix, for example, you send me the parts to Spread Love. They're already quantized, so I've got that work's done, so I can instantly just start working on the remix. Which I could probably you get the bulk of it. I don't like to rush these days, especially if it's a commissioned remix. If an artist has come to me, there's a fee attached to it. You want to do a good job. You don't want to rush it and bang it out and give it to him the next day, take the money and run. I like to sort of live with it. I like to play with it, do a bit, listen to it a couple of days later, do a bit more, listen to it a couple of days later, and just live with the tune for a bit. And then, I find that's a much better way of working, and you're much more pleased with the end result at the end of it.
Michael, I remember I asked him this, Michael Gray, everybody, how he's doing his productions and remixes. And I asked him, did he work on only one tune at a time? And he said, no, he would do a little bit here, put that on hold, and go and do something else. And multi-move, like, you're doing one track. So you're doing 3-4 tracks at a time.
Yeah.
Maybe not finishing them all quickly, but you're putting a little bit. Are you working on one at a time, or you're doing a little bit here?
I'm very similar to Michael. Like I'll have some projects that are sort of on the go. Some of them I might kind of feel like I've hit a wall, and I think I need to sort of have a break from this, listen to it in a couple of weeks' time, then a fresh idea will hit me, and which it often does. But then other times, if I mean, you probably know this yourself. If you've got a vibe going and it's working, you want to keep that momentum going and get it finished, but if you feel that you're forcing it a little bit and it's not quite like gelling like you want it to, then I'll go, okay, look, let's just put this on ice and have a look at it in a couple of weeks' time with a fresh perspective and fresh pair of ears.
Sometimes the things that you do at the time when you're involved, because you're so deep in it, you start to say to yourself, I'm not crazy about this. And then you put it aside. And I found that break, that rest period, you heard it again. You said, wait a minute, this is really good, because it's just part of hearing something redundantly over and over sometimes, that you say, am I losing the plot?
Oh yeah.
I'm saying
working on your own is not always the best either. Like if you've got someone in the studio with you, or you're collaborating with someone online, you can do it in stages and say, do you like this? Or I mean, I've done like half a dozen collaborations with Michael, and it's great because we're bouncing ideas off each other. And do you like this? Do you and I find that obviously when you're working on your own, you've only got yourself as judgment, really. Like I remember when I was working on your remix, I got sent your version of it, and I listened to it side by side. I was driving around in my car, and your one was just banging. And when the vocal come in, it was just smacking me in the face, and I went, and I kind of put mine after. I listened to it, and I was like, no, the vocals are too quiet. And I think I did an amended master. I went back to BMG and said, look, can you hold on? I need to do another quick mix. And I pushed the vocals up a bit more on mine, and then listened to it next to yours. I was like, now it's cooking. But see, if you was in the studio with me, at the time, you would have said that to me. You probably would have said, no, Greg, they've got to come up. They've got to come up.
Yeah, I probably would have told you it's hard to.
Exactly. Yeah, but you haven't got that person there. And when you sort of hear what, when I heard what you'd done with yours, I was like, no. I need to one more tweak. Yeah, but that's good. It's good to vibe off someone else, and
Listen, it's happened to all of us. I mean, throughout the years, I've gotten recall sheets from record labels on remixes or productions where they've asked me to go back in to do a recall.
Yeah.
Sometimes I agree with it, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, I'm the same. I mean, I had a long working relationship with Simon Dunmore when I'd done both the albums, and it was very rare. I think there was only one time where he gave me the go ahead on the first version I sent him, and that track was my remix of Kathy Brown, "Get Another Love," And his reply was, "No comments, Greg. Absolutely love it. You nailed it." And I was like, "Wow!" But I'm talking that's one track out of about 40. So all the others, we would probably anywhere between 3 to 5 versions. I'd have to keep, like, he'd come back with a suggestion and a tweak and try this, try that. And then we get up to about version 5, maybe, for anywhere between version 3, version 5. And they'd say, "Okay, we've settled on that. Let's send it off for mastering. It's a wrap." So yeah, I mean, there's always a bit of that going on. I mean, I even know if I'm doing a remix for someone, I actually send it to them before I think it's finished. So I'll get to the point where I'm maybe over the halfway mark, maybe 2/3 into it, and then I'll send it and go, "What do you think?" Just to sort of see if you're on the right path. Because I don't want to spend too much time on it to the point where I'm happy with it, send it to them, and then they're saying, "Oh, can you try this and try that?" And I've got to undo things. So I like to sort of send it early just to make sure I'm on the right path, which is a good way of working because, you haven't got to backtrack then.
Here's a question that I'm thinking about. We've had so much disco going on. A lot of disco now. We're about 10 years. I had the conversation with John Morales in England recently about it. Where do you think this disco train is going now? Because we lived it the first time around when we were kids. And then, of course, here in America, disco Burger King, disco McDonald's, disco your friend, disco shirts, disco hats. Go to a ball game, dance disco. Do you believe that disco will keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember being about 2 years into Dr. Packer, and it was so hot, disco. Everyone was onto it. Everyone was into it, and I remember people saying to me, enjoy it while it lasts. And I sort of remember thinking that's a little bit negative. It's almost like people saying it's not going to last, so enjoy it while you can. And I thought, okay, well, look, I just keep. I mean, I do get surprised myself that, like, I've been doing this now as Dr. Packer for 9 years, and it's still as strong as I've ever known it. Like, if anything, I think it's even still growing still, and I do think it got to a point maybe 2 or 3 years ago where I remember coming back here to the UK and every DJ was playing the same records. Chic, I Want Your Love, Sister Sledge, We Are Family, and it was like, come on, there's so much more out there, and people were just going for those. Every night I was going to, I was just hearing the same stuff, and I myself was getting bored of it. I was like, oh, and then I'd listen to someone like Dave Lee play, and I wouldn't know half of his set, but I knew there were old tracks that he was remixing, but they were so rare and obscure. And I'd be like in the booth watching him play, and I'd be buzzing. I'd just be going, "What is this? What is this?" That's what I think disco really needs to move forward. And I've noticed that even Simon Dunmore with Glitterbox and the Shapeshifters and the Horse Meat Disco guys just pumping out originals one after another, original disco. And they Simon knows what he's doing. He's been an A&R man for forever, and he's really good at his job. And he knows himself that how important it is to push original music as well as the old stuff. And I think if disco was just constantly just only re-edits of songs we've heard a million times, it would eventually burn out and people would get sick of it. But as long as there's modern productions coming out, I mean, Michael Gray's doing original disco. I'm trying to. I've done one, but and I've got a couple, in the pipeline where I've been sent some original top line vocals. One that I started, but I didn't quite get it ready in time for this tour. So when I get back, I'll finish it off. But yeah, I mean, I'm a believer that the disco scene needs new music to survive. as well as the old re-edits. I think if it was just remixes and edits, I think it would have burnt out by now. But the fact that we've got that kind of that option to keep disco sounding new as well is great.
That's
and I think with that in mind, I don't think it will die out anytime soon.
No, you're right. No, I agree. I think it will take a shape, maybe a little different turn.
Yes.
It has to. I don't think anything that would stay complacent can last. It's like anything else. We get tired of, hearing that same old sound over and over,
One thing I have noticed, playing at other events and listening to what other DJs are playing, is the drums seem to be going more houseier. Up until now, you got your disco drums, lots of live percussion and congas and stuff that gives it that real kind of disco feel. And I find that the groove that I'm hearing is still on a disco kind of tip, but the beats are getting much more simplified, almost like house. Like you could play it next to a house track and it wouldn't sound out of place. I have noticed that people's production are sort of going in that direction a little bit. Now, I'm not. I've kind of staying to what I'm used to doing, I suppose. But I think it sounds funny, but I'm kind of watching myself as well as I'm watching everyone else. Like, I just done my most recent track is a cover of D Train, You're the One for Me, but it was re-sung by Colonel Abrahams before he passed away. And even when I produced that, I was kind of like, I don't know how this is going to go, because it had my traditional Dr. Packer sound to it. It hit number one, and as soon if it hits number one, I'm like, look, I'm on the right path still, but I'm sort of waiting for that time where, I'll put something out there and it doesn't even reach a top 10, and I'll start thinking, okay, well, maybe people are getting tired of this sound, and I'll probably be ready to adjust, to make an adjustment, if required. But I mean, as long as I can do what I do and they're selling well, and my gigs are, I've still got gigs, then I don't see a need for me to personally have to change my sound. I think as long as it's still relevant.
Yeah, I mean, look, you etch yourself, your sound. Know that how you sound, and they know what you do. But I'm going to be honest, there's not many first-class productions that are standing out, that are not a classic track, that you're touching, that you go, holy smoke.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The new stuff. I'm talking about a new singer sitting down, writing a song. It's not many of those.
No, it is very hard to come up with an original song, unless you've got, if you've got, you look at the way Simon Dunmore would do it with the Shapeshifters. They will record strings. They've got bass players, keyboard players. It's like a band that's produced that song. And Shapeshifters has obviously put it together, engineered it, got the vocals in. And it's so when it's presented. And in the final product, it's literally like a band has recorded this, and obviously Simon's invested in that. That's where I would probably fall short, because I haven't got that access, back in Perth. I haven't got a drummer I can bring in and a bass player I can bring in and record some strings and all that kind of stuff. So I have to try and do it myself. I mean, I can have certain live elements, but also vocalists as well, like Australian vocalists. I mean, in London you're spoiled for choice for who you can use, really, but in Australia you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, where do I look for vocals?
Right, you're pigeonholed. You can only do so much. No, I know you're not. It's not like you're in New York City or London, where you have everybody coming through.
I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where, I'm working with some of the biggest vocalists in the industry. Like for Nervous Records, they're giving me tunes by Kim English to remix, and Kenny Bobin and stuff like that. Like legendary vocalists that I'm working with anyway, but they're remixes. It's not like they're not original songs. But it's not to say that down the line one day, like, I can't hook up with one of these vocalists and say, look, how about let's have a go at doing something original. I'm sure I can make it happen down the line.
Dr. Parker, here's the thing. You've already got a plethora of great records in the sense of 1976, 1977, 78, 79, 1980, right? In that period.
Yeah.
South Soul, West End, tons of great records. Mm-hmm. You've already starting where the level is here. And now you're taking it with the technology we're all working with. We wish we had all that back then.
Yeah.
To make them sound what you're doing to this point. Incredible. So I give you that. But we're also saying how envious everyone is of you in a good way, because you're touching Picasso's and this. These are Rembrandts. These are not like.
I know. Yeah, I mean, when I got kind of in with South Soul at BMG, and they said, by the way, we also control West End, and the next thing I knew, I was doing like Raw Silk, do it to the music, and I was like, well, this isn't happening. And also with Simon Dunmore, I mean, he gave me like Pete Heller's Big Love and Lola's Theme by Shapeshifters, and to me, they're two of the biggest dance tracks like in history. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I take this to the next level? And like you say, it's like people are giving me Picasso's and stuff like that, and I'm just like, no pressure, like, but what are you going to do to this? But like, yeah, I mean, I thought,
don't screw it up. Just make it.
I know. Don't butcher it. Yeah, exactly.
Here's one offbeat. What beer are you drinking? What kind of beer?
Peroni.
There you go. For all the people out there, he's drinking.
On my rider.
There you go. Yeah. I just watched like the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger speak about his life with the Stones. Yeah. And, you look at those bands, what they did in 50 years, and the same with music. Disco never died. It just went to the side,
Yeah.
And when we started house music, it was the revenge of disco, because those that love house music love disco. You have to. The ones from the original first core of house music, we used to all listen to those disco records, and we would dream to make records like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like a Dr. Love. Oh my God, let no man put us under. So, of course, we're watching you, Dave Lee, then Michael Gray got in the thing, because Michael was a house guy too for a long time, Full Intention. Dimitri was, touching stuff, and Tom Moulton, I'll use him as an example because I've spoken to him over the years over this. Tom doesn't like when all of you take records. For example, I shouldn't say like, he dislikes the idea of a remixer reproducing parts.
Okay, yeah.
He'd rather hear it like the way this is how he sees it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
With the original stems of the multi as a so-called, what was originally a remix.
Yeah.
You were taking what they gave you and rearranging it. And as the years went on and technology happened, people started to have these ideas of overdubbing. Yeah. Sort of like what you said. When you started your SoundClouds, you were taking disco re-edits and giving it a bit of bigger sound by pushing it with additional, let's call it what it is, additional production work.
Yeah.
To really make stuff sound crisp, banging, and make it for the younger crowd to say, that's not my grandfather or mother's record. It's my record now.
Yeah.
So good on you on that. And a lot of people don't know that you were really doing that. They thought, oh, wow, he's taking the stuff and somehow magically with salt and pepper and garnishing it to make it sound like this beautiful thing. But in actuality, you're really giving it more of your input, not only as a remixer, but as a producer as well.
Yeah. I like to say, like, breathing new life into music, or into these old tracks, I suppose. Yeah.
So now that you've touched almost every record in the game, would you ever return back to your former Greg Packer drum and bass?
I did do a remix earlier this year for so Carl Cox has got an Australian manager. He does the mobile disco with this guy called Eric Powell. I'm not sure if you know him. So they do this thing called Carl Cox and Eric Powell's Mobile Disco. When they do all kinds of stuff. They do disco. They do soul, funk, hip hop, and they play drum and bass. And they'd done a cover version of "Wishing on a Star," which the original was Rolls Royce, I think. Am I correct? And he said it's really slow. And I said, "Can you do a Greg Packer jungle mix?" I said, "Okay." And so I did one for Eric Powell, and also I did one for Carl Cox, a Bob Marley Exodus drum and bass mix, which he played on BBC Radio 1 when he did his drum and bass set. So this was a COVID thing, by the way. So when over the pandemic, when our borders were closed and I couldn't travel, I started to take on Greg Packer sets again, playing classic drum and bass. That was really just a temporary thing to keep the, pay the bills, keep the income coming in. And and I happened to do those two mixes for Carl Cox and Eric Powell during that period, and I quite enjoyed it. But I did question when I was doing it.
That's what I want to hear.
I did think,
in your mind, would
I do it again full time? And the answer is no.
And why?
I enjoyed it, but I didn't get that hunger, well, how can I explain it? When I heard that Late Nite Tuff Guy mix of Lover's Holiday, I got that hunger, and I just went, damn, I got to do this. I have to do this. But going back with the drum and bass thing, I was kind of like, yeah, this is fun. And even playing a couple of sets out, I was like, yeah, this is cool. But I'm like, no, I want these borders down. I want to be traveling. I want to carry on this Dr. Packer journey because it's exciting. Yeah.
But we don't want it to end.
No, absolutely not.
Something truth be told. So I took my first crack, 2016, first disco record I did, produced it from scratch.
I remember.
Got Shirley Lights involved.
Yeah.
Melt You Down girl from West End Records, right? And I did this thing called Fire.
That's how we met, wasn't it? Yeah.
And the question that came from Packer was, are you the same Lenny Fontana who had that record on Packer Records, the drum and bass record? I said, yeah, it's me.
Well, the thing is, in those days, I was a massive fan of New Tone, and I had a few other fellow drum and bass, DJs, and we thought New Tone was God. Everything he touched turned to gold. He was the man. And of course, we all knew about Hospital Records, and it was like, to be honest, when I saw it, it was like Lenny Fontana, Spread Love, New Tone remix. I listened to it because it had New Tone remix on it.
Oh, sure, of course.
And then I went and I heard it. I went, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. And of course, all my friends and me included, we played it to death. And then I got onto the Norman J Good Times compilations. I loved them, and I started collecting them. And of course, it had Lenny Fontana Spread Love, but it didn't have New Tone remix in it. And I went, this must be the original. And then and then I heard the proper house mix, which was your original mix of it. And I was just like, oh, wow. And then I'm playing that as well. Like, I was such a fan of both mixes of that track. And then when I'd done the Fire tune with you, my friends said to me, ask him to do Spread Love. And I'm like, he's not going to let me remix Spread Love. And he's going, ask him. And then we realized when you said that BMG owned it, I was so heavily connected with BMG through the South Soul and West End. I thought, I've got to ask this question. So I asked the question. I said, look, could we remix it? Lenny and myself, can we bring it back to life? And sure enough, they were happy to go with it. And that was amazing opportunity.
Hang on. Wait. Let's give everyone a real scoop inside what it's like to call BMG out on this. So he asks me about the record. I did the deal originally with Asteria Records.
Yeah.
UK. Okay. This is going in the 90s, guys. 1990s. 1996. I think I did the deal. That record label Stereo is owned by Fatboy Slim, Norman Cook, Skint Records.
Yeah.
Skint Records 6 years ago decides to sell catalog, Skint, and all their subsidiaries to BMG. So what happens is BMG, as the company they are, Berkshire Music Group, comes in and buys the catalogs.
Yeah.
They put that stuff away in a closet down below. Nobody knows where this stuff is. It becomes what they call catalog music.
Yeah.
So when he says about going to them first, the question was, what record are you talking about? Because they don't even understand what he's mentioning. I didn't even know what he was talking about. Spread Love. They're like, what is it? So we have to go through the whole thing to explain. It was signed from, that stuff? Yeah, that stuff. And he's laughing. So he knows what I'm talking about. So we're talking is about 2 months of just mails going back and forth to get them to realize that some of this historic music is in their catalogs, in the basement, down below in the dungeon area where trolls live. Now, here's the next question. Do they have the parts to do the remix?
No.
They got zero. They got no parts.
No.
And the next question comes back to me from him. Lenny, do you have the parts? Yes.
Of course.
Yes, I do have the parts. Yes, I do have the parts. Of that record, I have the parts. But see, my point is, back in the day, when we signed the record over to these labels in the 90s, all they wanted was the acapellas and the main mixes on DAT tapes, and over, and that was it. So what these labels all bought from the 90s are records mostly just with acapellas. And I know that because a friend of ours at times will do where he lifts the multi-tracks, makes multi-track stems from the actual 2 tracks. With software, but it takes time. There's a lot, and I know we all go through painstaking things. I get calls. Do you have parts for this remix you did? No, because back then we flew stuff in, played the keyboard parts, went right from virtual and went right to tape, and so it's terrible. But that's a big part of the 90s, 80s. 90s and before the 2000s, then everybody started asking for stems. Pre to that, this is still a nightmare because I know you must go through it still looking for parts.
They BMG even asked me because they've released four South Soul EPs of mine, so like 4 tracks, 16 South Soul tracks, and there was a couple. I think it was Hit and Run, and I'm not sure. I think it might have been Love Thing, Hit and Run. And I remember the guy who was working at the time, a guy called Simon Dawson, he was emailing me going, how the bloody hell have you got the parts to this? Or how have you I was just like, all right, look, I can't tell you where I got them from. It's as simple as that.
Does it make a difference how I got the parts?
The person that gave them to me initially said you didn't get them from me. So I was like, well, okay, well,
yeah, well, leave that right there.
I'll take that stuff to the grave with me. And I said, look, at the end of the day, you know, you're going to release them. I've got the parts. They're on, you know, it's a proper mix down. It's a proper production. It's not an overdub, you know, and you should just be happy with that. So, yeah.
No questions asked. Right here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, some of the people that the biggest names in the industry trust me enough to send me that session, and they know that I'm going to do a good job with it. So it's like, well, I don't go around begging people saying, "Oh God, can I have this?" or "I'll swap this for that." You know, if it comes to me, it comes to me. It was meant to happen. That's the way I look at it. You know.
Packer, before I let you go, because I know you're busy. 2 big things happened this week. Happy birthday to you on the half-century mark. Everyone, please wish him a happy birthday, because I did.
Thank you.
We got 50 more years. Yeah, we got 50 more years in front of you of disco mixing to make the centennial man.
Let's hope so.
From my mouth to God above, we hope for the best.
Well, if DC LaRue's still doing this at 80 years old, then
DC's coming on a Friday show to sing all his tunes right here.
I've got at least 30 years ahead of me.
The single coming out, Packers done. I heard the mix. Packers mix is hot for the DC LaRue.
Hot Jungle Drums and Voodoo Rhythm and Cathedrals, which I did over the pandemic. You know, that was I mean, over the pandemic, I did more studio production and got chatting to DC, and he said, "Yeah, why don't you do a couple of my tracks?" And I mean, he was thrilled to bits with what I did, and as was I, and we got them out on Glitterbox, and happy days. But yeah, I'm just privileged to work with, like, you know, legends in the industry. You know, the original guys like DC LaRue, Soul Soul with West End. I feel truly blessed that, you know, they're calling on my services.
The doctor's surgery. The big news. On Monday, it came out that Defected Records, Simon Dunmore, the A&R man himself, is stepping down. He's retiring after a year and has sold all the assets.
Yes, yeah.
Over.
I knew he told me he was retiring last year sometime, but I just thought he meant he was retiring from DJing, like the traveling around the world, the late nights, you know, that kind of lifestyle. But it took me by surprise. I thought he would keep going with the office side of things, the A&R stuff, but obviously not. You know, it took me by surprise as much as it took everyone else by surprise. It'll be interesting. I think Wes is taking over. It'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Let me just say this, everyone. I've had this conversation and as well experience. This is my own experience. This is what happens when big companies with a vision now change hands. I twice in my career had 2 massive hits and got caught up with 2 major labels being bought out. And twice that happened to me. Twice those records get lost, and everybody who is amongst that vision of A&Rs are sometimes lost. So we hope that with Wes at the helm, the vision will go on and stay strong for all of them. It's not that I wish anything bad. It's just that out of experience, and others I know that were caught up in Casablanca moving to Polygram, or Strictly Rhythm being bought out by Warner's. It just, the vision of corporate doesn't always see the vision of, say, a Dr. Packer if you're running a label. You know, corporate people don't understand the feeling of what we feel, or the adornment or love to the music. You know?
Yeah, but I think, I mean, Simon, he must have thought really hard about who he was going to kind of let fill his shoes, I suppose. And I'm sure he's the right man for the job.
I give him the best. Packer, get your albums. More remixes we need from you.
Yeah.
More DJing sets. Next week, I know you have your last gig in England, and then you're flying back to...
That's correct. So I've got this this coming weekend, which is the bank holiday weekend. I should probably say that I've been here since the middle of June, so it's a nice long tour.
Jesus.
Yeah, I've had gigs.
Is your missus there with you, or is she back home?
She's joining me on next weekend. So she normally joins me sort of towards the end of my trips, and we have a little holiday afterwards. So this weekend I've got a gig up in Leeds, downtown disco, and Prince of Wales in Brixton with Greg Wilson, and that's my final 2 gigs. And then she joins me, and then we have around about 9 days holiday. This year we're just going to stay in the UK. But yeah, we've been apart for over 2 months, which has not been easy. It was because I lost 2 years from the pandemic. I wasn't able to tour in 2020 or 21. We sort of made a mutual decision to go longer this time, to try and make up for a little bit of lost ground, which I hope that I have done.
He did. He made up for lost ground. He's been all over the UK. I was crossing paths around him here, there.
I know you was here as well. At one point, I think Karen was trying to link us up in Nottingham at one point, but I think
couldn't do it.
Well, you're busy, I'm busy. It's just hard to, there's people that are messaging me even now saying, when are you going back? We still haven't linked up yet. And I'm like, well, time's getting tight now. I'm only here for 2 more weeks. So yeah, it's yeah.
You know what I'm going to tell you? Like Carol Burnett used to say, everybody, go home. Time to go home, baby. Yeah, regroup, go do your gigs in Australia. We'll see you on that side. I will see you on that side next year in 23.
I'll look forward to that. Yeah. And if you need anything, you just hit me up.
Oh, you know I'm going to. This is Lenny Fontana coming out of NYC to England, to Perth, and abroad.